on this computer. And then, okay. So good morning, good afternoon, Mort. Welcome to the Art of Service. What is supposed to be the LinkedIn live streaming, but we're now doing Zoom recording and then uploading. So
how does this work? Is it you broadcast this to LinkedIn?
Yes, I will. Like normally with the other system, it automatically broadcasts to LinkedIn, but we couldn't get that to work. So I now record it. And then once we finish the recording, it will be automatically uploaded into the other system. And then it will be broadcast to YouTube and LinkedIn. So so that we still have the same end result. It's just not live. So, but you know, it's neither here or there.
Okay.
So as an introduction, Mort, thank you for joining me. It has been 11 years since we first met, or 12 years since we first met at the Entrepreneurial Masters Program in Boston at the beautiful Endicott House at MIT. And yes, as you know, I've been going through my list of our cohort, as I think it's called. And so who are the people I want to reconnect with, and who are the people that I'm super interested in to see, you know, what happened in the last 10 years. And, you know, you are pretty much fairly on top of my list, to be honest, because yeah, like I was thinking about it this morning, and I went, because if I think back, you've always been, or came across to me in that program as such a humble entrepreneur. Like you were always sort of sitting in that ride, like right in front of the classroom, but you were kicking some amazing goals, and you're so strategic in your thinking, you're so strategic in your approach, and you know, there's always people that are always talking and always in you know, giving their opinions, and then you would sort of quietly sit there, and then you would go, but have you considered this? And it would always blow me away.
Oh, thank you. That's very kind.
Oh, no, it's not kind if it's the truth. It's my opinion. But how have you been? What have you been up to? Tell me more about Mort O'Sullivan.
Yeah, so gosh, over the last 10 or 12 years, a lot has happened. So I guess when I first met you, you know, my company was very successful, distributor and you know, producer of cash equipment in the US market. We've grown a lot since then. We were probably, I don't know, 100 people at that time, and you know, primarily US based. And since then, we made an acquisition in our space and did a vertical integration. We essentially acquired our key supplier, a company in Italy that supplied all the key technology for us. And then, you know, we have control over the technology and the manufacturing process, and grew to be, you know, over 400 people, and kind of a global player. So it allowed us to expand the way we sell outside the United States and control the manufacturing chain. So that was a big change for us.
Yeah. So how did you go about that? Because that's like basically quadrupling your business. How did you manage that? You know, from a process point of view, but culture as well. Like how did you go through that?
Well, there are a lot of parts to that. I think the key thing was really the relationship we had with the supplier, and without, you know, a long history of working with them, I don't think we would have been able to successfully complete that acquisition. But with that, you know, it still required more capital than we had available. So we did raise capital through some outside investors. So it was the first time as a company we took on institutional investors. And that's been, you know, very interesting. I think we picked very good partners, and that's been 7 years since that took place. And as you know, institutional investors, you know, have it's time clock for their investments, and so you have to be ready to kind of cycle through to new investors. And so that's kind of the stage we are as a company now. We just entered an agreement to sell the company to another strategic player in our space, and so that's another big
That's
change.
exciting.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. And so that cycle that you've been going through, I mean, when you have an institutional investor, you know that there's this 7 year cycle. That's what you
or less. Yeah,
or less,
so.
like ideally for them, less.
Yeah.
What does that do with you mentally? Because then, like you say, you're on the clock. How does that change your behavior?
Yeah, I mean, it certainly gives you a sense of urgency to create value for everybody in the time frame that you need to. So I would say it definitely does bring that sense of urgency. But I knew that going in, so it was not a surprise or anything I was not expecting.
Yeah. So let's go all the way back, because your business is cash technology. Because I always thought it was like FPOS machines and all that sort of stuff. But explain to me, how did you start this business? What did young Mort think when he started this business?
Yeah, so I started the business. I was very young. I was 26 years old starting the business, and we started as a distributor of technology from NCR. They are, one of the largest ATM manufacturers in the world, and they wanted to get more companies to use their technology in self-service devices, kiosks, gaming machines, other ATMs, things like that. So we signed up as a distributor of their technology and helped other companies deploy that technology, because it's very specialized technology, and companies needed assistance to deploy that, and NCR wasn't really set up to help all the small players that were possibly looking at using that kind of technology. So that's the niche we filled initially. After a couple of years, we realized we could also use that technology to build our own products. And so we started to build our own banking products using the technology from NCR. We added other manufacturers along the way. So Fujitsu was another close partner of ours, and it kind of grew our own line of products to sell into the banking world.
Yeah. So banks and financial institutions are your main clients.
Yes.
Is that correct?
So, yeah, they have historically been our main clients, and we specifically focus on the efficiency in bank branches. So we're automating processes for the bank employees around cash handling.
Yeah, so it's all around cash handling. So it's the counting, the distribution, the managing, maintaining, all that entire life cycle of cash through the banking system.
Exactly.
Yeah. So that's a very specific niche. So as a 26-year-old, how do you go about selling to those large organizations? Because selling to banks, I'm assuming there's a lot of red tape to go through, and there's a lot of risk management and compliance issues to deal with. So how do you get into that process? So
yeah, so as a young company, we didn't have the credibility in the financial institutions that we would need to sell to them. So we initially partnered with small regional bank equipment dealers across the US. We set up a network of about 35 equipment dealers. The smaller ones would cover part of a state, and some of the larger ones would cover multiple states in the US. And through their relationships and their credibility with the financial institutions, we were able to get a foot in the door. And so that's really how we got started. it was a slow process. It never happens as fast as you would like it to. You're working with all these other partners, and you have to get their mind share and focused on your product and solution. So it takes time to do that, but we were able to do that over a number of years, and probably took 5 or 6 years to really create the kind of critical mass that we were looking for.
Yeah, yeah. So it really is all about relationship building and really working through the slow little baby steps of the personal side of business, not just the technology side. Is that a correct way of looking at it?
Absolutely.
Has that been the secret
You have to
sauce?
have good technology. The product has to work. You have to have a solution that the customers need, but that's not enough. You also need the relationship side.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So then you grow your own products, your own technology. And how did that technology differ from, because you mentioned the word value before. So how did that technology add value in addition to everything that was already on the market? Because it seems to be such a closed environment, the banking industry.
It is, and we, selling teller cash dispensers and teller cash recyclers is a very niche market, and so there weren't a lot of competitors. What we focused on is being more flexible than our competitors. We didn't necessarily focus on being the lowest cost. We didn't think that was the most important thing. And I think that's true. Financial institutions, they have the money to pay for the equipment. What they want is something that's easy to implement and reliable. And so we focused on making the integration of the technology into their systems as easy as possible and making the product as reliable as possible.
Yeah, yeah, and that obviously hit a nerve. Now it's 2022, and I'm as a consumer of banking services, I'm looking back to the last 20 years, and also as a consultant into the banking world, but then from a business process point of view and an IT service management point of view, a lot has changed. Like the banking world from 20 years ago, when we were in our 20s, 30s, probably 30s, to now is different. A lot has changed. So from your perspective, what's the biggest change that has happened in your industry? And how did you deal with that?
That's a very good question. The banking industry actually doesn't change as fast as some other industries. I mean, technology moves faster than I would say the banking industry in general moves. And we're dealing with cash, which most people would see as something a little bit archaic. Everything's moving toward digital payments. So the world is moving toward, newer technologies, other kinds of payment methods. But I think what's interesting about what we do is, it's something that not everybody else is focusing on, yet it's something that's very durable in the market. So if you look at the amount of cash in circulation over the last 20 years, it has actually gone up every single year for the last 20 years. Even though cash as a percentage of all payments is going down, the amount of cash in circulation continues to go up. So we feel like we found a very interesting niche to focus on that's not interesting to a lot of other players.
Yeah. And I'm just thinking about that cash. Sorry, when you said that, I was like, yeah, but the US dollar hasn't changed. Like the actual payment or the paper, how the US dollar is printed, that hasn't changed for, I don't know what, 100 years?
No, it actually changes quite often. So
does it?
Yes, the Bureau of Engraving redesigns each denomination on a pretty regular cycle. Every 7 to 10 years, there's a new $20 bill, a new $100 bill to try to stay ahead of the counterfeiters. So they're introducing new security features in the notes all the time, and our technology has to keep up with that and make sure that we're able to support all the new features and also understand what kinds of counterfeiting activities are in the market and make sure we're able to filter all of that out.
Yeah, yeah. So does your technology identify counterfeit bills? Is that part of the things that you do?
It does. It can identify suspected counterfeits. Ultimately, each central bank is the ultimate arbiter of whether something truly is a counterfeit or not. But we can flag notes that we believe are counterfeit.
Yeah, yeah. So that in itself really touches on, I mean, for me, it touches on compliance. So when I talk to our clients, I always say, like, we put you in control of compliance, but you're like the impersonation of compliance needs. So how does that flow through in your business? What is it
Yeah,
that you focus on for compliance?
Yeah, so compliance is a big part of our business, and the requirements from a compliance perspective for our technology really vary a lot country by country or region by region. So for example, the European Central Bank has very strict compliance requirements in place for deploying our kind of technology in branches, and we have to make sure that we adhere to all of that. Other countries like the US are not as kind of top down, controlling the compliance environment. So it's a little bit looser in the US actually than other countries.
Mm.
But we always make sure that we are compliant with each country's requirements.
Yeah. So how do you know to what extent you need to be compliant? How do you find out the end game? How do you know?
I mean, we're looking at two things. One is to what degree do the customers in the market, have a strong desire to be compliant? What are they trying to be compliant with? But also the relationships we have with the central banks, understanding where their concerns are and what they want us to be compliant with. So it's really understanding the customer's perspective, also understanding the central bank's perspectives.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's a two. So the central bank being the governing body, basically, and then your clients, the direct areas.
Yeah.
So you mentioned that cash is still growing. The amount of cash flowing through the economy is still growing. The industry as such hasn't really changed that much in your view. But then what is the biggest risk? What is it that you're worried about going forward?
Yeah, I mean, we look at a lot of trends. We're always looking at payment trends, and is cash going to still be used as a payment method? And we believe it absolutely is. So that's not something that keeps me up at night. What do I worry about? I mean, making sure, really what I worry about is making sure that we are evolving as a company fast enough to meet our customers' needs. The things I think about are we evolving fast enough to keep up with the way that bank branches operate in the world? So processes that used to be more in the back office, now maybe some banks are getting rid of their back office and focusing more on the front office, or is our technology able to keep up with those trends?
Yeah, so it's really keeping an eye out and a finger on the pulse of what it is that the banking world is doing. So it's like, here in Australia, there's not a lot of branches with tellers anymore, like physical people that you can go to hand in your cash. Like it's all automated. Like there's a reverse ATM machine where you can do deposits. And so I'm assuming for your systems that doesn't really matter, because you can still sell the cash machines. It's just a different positioning within the bank.
Yes, it is. And if we're selling machines that are going to be facing the consumer, we have to take different approaches to the technology. If you have a trained operator operating the machine, you can make certain assumptions about jam rates and ease of use that you can't necessarily make those same assumptions as if it's the general consumer or a business owner using the technology.
Yeah, yeah. And bigger pictures like macroeconomic changes or geopolitical changes. Like there's a lot of volatility in not just the market but the world. How does that impact your business?
I mean, we used to do a good bit of business in Russia, for example, and that it's not something we're doing any longer. So certainly geopolitical events, can have an impact on our business.
Yeah, but not to the extent that you have countermeasures in place to make sure that it doesn't impact too much.
No, and we'd already kind of focused our efforts and markets in the world that were growing much faster. So our core markets really haven't been impacted as much by those events.
Yeah. So talk to me about managing a growth business, or being the owner of a growth business. How has that changed you? Because you said 10 years ago you were with 100 people, which is already significant. So the 10 years before that was probably sort of when you started the business. So how did you manage that, to go from 0 to 100 in like 10 odd years, and then 100 to 400 in another 10 years?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think I've learned a lot over that time, for sure. I've grown as a leader. You learn that you have to be really good at developing other leaders. You can't just expect to do everything yourself. And so that's something I think anybody who's on that kind of a growth path learns and has to become better at.
Yeah. So is delegation, is that what you're saying? Like that's been your biggest growth?
Yeah, I would say delegation and focusing on growing other leaders and cultivating the right kind of culture and leadership in the organization that you want to grow the company.
Yeah. So you rather grow leaders from inside rather than getting external people in?
It could be a bit of both. I mean, you can certainly, grow leaders from internally, but also hiring is an important part of growth, and hiring the right people and the right talent to, what sometimes happens in companies, and certainly happened with us, is, as your company grows, it may be outgrowing some of the leadership abilities of the people you have, and so you have to bring in new talent that has perhaps more experience, or has already been in leadership roles in companies the size of where you're trying to grow, and so you have to bring in people from outside as well.
Yeah. And what kind of framework or system do you use within your organization to identify where you need to add in new people, or to identify where there are growth opportunities?
We've had different systems over the years. I mean, we've tried, I would say some interesting organizational systems. At one point we implemented a kind of non-hierarchical system called holacracy. And that was something that we did for about 3 or 4 years. It was quite interesting. It was difficult to do with a company our size. We were already at 400 people. That proved to be challenging. So we migrated back to a more traditional org structure after that. And in terms of deciding where you need to grow, it's just looking at where your pain points are and focusing on what you need to do to solve those pain points, and then that pain point will move somewhere else in the organization.
Yeah. So it's really laser target. It's really that focus that helped you grow.
Yeah. I think when we've gotten in trouble as a company is when we tried to do too many things at one time and lost the focus we needed.
What happened?
Well, we got to a point where we were trying to do too many things at once, and you know, your profitability starts to suffer. When you're trying to do too many things at one time, you're not able to achieve your goals. So what we had to do was reorganize the way we were doing things. We scaled back our activities and focused on where we were really making money as a company. And that proved to be very successful.
Yeah. And you as a leader of the company, what is your biggest lesson that you've learned, apart from, you already mentioned the delegation and growing your leadership team, but for you as a person?
For me as a person, I mean, I've learned so much over the years. I think one of the main things I've learned is it's important to be true to yourself, to not be afraid to express yourself in the company. And you know, I think that's key to building a good culture and an organization where people are excited to come and be part of that organization.
Yeah. So it's really that authenticity that that will go through. And the other thing that I was thinking, and I've been thinking about that with all of us from that group from the EMP program. It's actually Jonathan who started this, because he talked about a book that he's reading, and he said, like, you know, I'm in my 50s now, and it's really important for me to think about my legacy, and not so much legacy once I'm dead, but what's happening in the next period. What is my legacy? What experiences do I want to have? And that could be within the business, that could be outside of the business. So my question to you is, like, how do you think about your, I mean, we still have, you know, we have the same hair color, so how do you think about your legacy, or do you have a bucket list, or how does that play a role in your life?
Yeah, it's something I've been thinking a lot about recently with the you know, transitions with the sale of the company and things like that. So one thing that's important to me is to make sure that the company can thrive and grow beyond me. So I don't want the company to be dependent on me at all. I think I've succeeded in doing that, in building the right leadership team that can take the company beyond me. But I also want to make sure, I wanted to make sure in the sale process that the buyer really valued the company in ways similar to me. And so, you know, would kind of be a good steward of the company that I've built. And so that was very important to me from a legacy perspective. And beyond that, you know, I think I will end up doing things beyond the company. You know, I've been doing this for 24, almost 25 years, and you know, I haven't decided what I would do, you know, next, but it's something that I'm thinking a lot about and excited about.
Yeah, because that's I find I have a couple of people around me that have sold their business, and a lot of them are struggling, or seem to be struggling with and now what? Like, I've sold the business. What's my purpose? What do I do now? Like, where do I go next? How do you see that evolving for you?
Yeah, I think I'm going to take some time. I don't want to rush into anything that I don't want to feel like I have to be doing something that's the next thing, you know, 3 months after the sale of the company. So my plan is to take some time, reflect on that, and make sure the next thing that I focus my energies on is something I'm really excited about and really want to spend my time growing again.
Yeah.
And
So,
I'm excited about that.
so would you start a new business, you think, or are you sort of go like, nah, been there, done that, was successful,
No,
I'm done.
no, no, I think I would definitely start a new business. I mean, I don't know what that will be yet, but I think starting businesses, growing businesses is in my blood, and
Yeah.
I will
Yeah.
continue to do that.
Yeah. So in order to do that, you need to stay healthy.
Yes.
What's your health routine, both physical and mental?
Yeah, so exercise is a big part of my health routine. So I think that plays both into your physical well-being and your mental well-being. So I do regular cardio exercises, weights. I play tennis regularly, so that is really important for my mental health.
Yeah. Yeah, and that helps you to look beyond the 7 years or look beyond the sale of the business and continue with that energy.
Yeah, I mean, I just turned 50 this year. I think I will have another 50 years if I can live in the right way.
Yeah, exactly. It is interesting, like the whole longevity thing, like, being in our 50s now. I think, if we don't smoke, if we exercise, if we sleep enough, I think most of us will hit that sort of 90-ish, maybe
Yeah,
100. So it's
yeah, yeah.
it's interesting to sort of think that there's another 50 years to go. We're literally only halfway.
I believe that's true. Yeah.
Yeah. So I also coach a lot of accelerators, and I love those. So I'm still part of the EO community, the EO ecosystem, and very much involved with the accelerator programs. Um, you're thinking about restarting again once you've sold the business. When I speak with accelerators, what is the Mort lesson that I could pass on to them? What is it that accelerators should really focus on from your experience?
Yeah. I look back at kind of the arc of my experience growing my company, and I think if I were to do it all again, I could do it much faster, which I think goes to the kind of the ethos of the accelerator mindset. I think you've got to have the right vision for your company and um, the right product or service for sure. But I think if you prioritize bringing on the right people, aligning everybody behind that vision, that you can move much faster. And I feel like I could get to the point that it took me 10 years and something like 4 or 5 years if I were to start over and do it again.
Yeah. And is that bringing in people, but also investment earlier in the piece?
Not necessarily investment. It doesn't have to be investment. I would say investment in people is important. So investing the company's resources and hiring the right people, putting in place the systems to develop those people and align everybody around a common purpose.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's the secret to growth and accelerate.
I do think so.
What is then the flip side? What are the things that they shouldn't do? Like, what are the lessons you've learned? You went like, oh, that hurt. Please don't do this because that's not going to be good.
Um, Again, going back to people, I think one of the things that I wish I were better at earlier on was moving people out of the organization that aren't a good fit. And so, tolerating the wrong kind of people in the organization is something that is very painful. And the sooner you can learn to not do that, the better.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a tough lesson to learn, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
Do you think, why do you think that is so difficult? Because I hear that a lot, and I have the same thing. Like I find it really difficult.
Yeah, I think part of it is personality. I mean, I'm the kind of personality doesn't like direct conflict and necessarily. So, I think some of it's down to that. Some of it is just as somebody who's growing a business, sometimes you think, well, this person is really difficult person in the organization, but yet they're bringing in some results. So I can't do without those results. It's fear of what would happen if this person were gone. And I think the more you let those people go and you realize that the business goes on and actually thrives and does better without them, then the easier it becomes to make those changes.
Yeah, yeah. So the success is around people. It's finding the right people, but if they're not the right person, get them out of the business as soon as possible. So that's it's the in out, and really only focus and then grow the leadership and grow the potential of the people that are with you. So that's the basic thing. But then you bought a business, then you bought your suppliers. And the other thing that I was thinking, like, when did this purchase happen? Was that about that 7 years ago when you got the
about
investment?
7 years ago.
Yeah. So the first 4 years would have been lots of travel, building the teams, building the culture and the people, and then COVID hit. So how did you manage that with being in lockdown or not being able to fly? Is it just Italy that you're dealing with? That tell me more about your global operation.
Yeah, so we have a presence in Italy and France and the UK. And the biggest presence is in Italy outside of the US. So we have a few hundred people there. And I feel very grateful that we had focused on hiring the right leaders in Italy to help in leading the business there. And so we had some very good leaders that were on the ground in Italy when COVID hit. And so, learning how to use Zoom very quickly and staying in touch with everybody and having good leaders there was invaluable.
Yeah.
But it's interesting. I went from traveling 250 plus days a year to 0, and that was a big change.
Yeah. How did you deal with that?
It was hard at first. In some ways, it was very nice. Spending a lot more time with my family. And what you realize is I still think that in-person interactions is important, but there are a lot of things that you can do remotely that didn't necessarily think was possible.
Yeah. So how have you changed? Are you still traveling 250 days a year now, or what changes have you made post opening up of the borders?
A lot less travel. So I think I try to make at least a trip over to Europe once a quarter, but it's not like 2 or 3 trips a month like it used to be.
Yeah. And the business hasn't suffered? Like it's still
Not
going?
at all. It's going strong. It's actually stronger than it's ever been. So it's a good thing.
Yeah. It's I don't know. Sometimes I wonder and look at myself and I go like, okay, but if I don't travel, if I don't have that face-to-face contact, then they'll forget about me. Or and then when the business does better when you're not there, you go like, okay, they don't need me. Maybe it's just ego talking. I don't know, but it's how did you go around that?
I mean, I think there is some of that for sure, but one of my goals was to make sure the company would be successful and not need me. And so I think being able to back off a bit and not be as present, but still see the company thrive is something that is one of the things I was trying to accomplish. So I think that's a good thing.
Yeah. So that's a good setup for the sale, just to show like, see, it's not dependent on me. It can be sold off. I can step out and the business will thrive and grow. So from that point of view, it's been a really good sort of final rehearsal before sale.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when is the sale happening? What's the timeline?
I mean, we've already signed all the agreements, so it's pretty much a done deal. We have a couple of regulatory approvals we're waiting from certain countries, and then it will be done.
Mm,
So within the next month at least,
yeah. Wow. So 1st of January will be a fresh start on all accounts.
for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. That's so cool. That's so cool. Um, anything else you want to share? Because I've run out of questions.
No, no. Nothing else to share really, but I thank you for asking me to come on. It's been a pleasure.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. And I can't wait to hear your next part of your journey. But first, relax and take your time after the sale of the business. Because if my other friends' experiences is anything to go by, and I remember, when we were at EMP, remember Dusty sold his business, and he was so excited initially, and then it hit that, oh, I don't have a business anymore. And that whole process, I've seen that played over and over and over in the last 10 years. So look after
Yeah.
yourself, and I can't wait to hear what you're going to do next. It'll be exciting.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Ivanka.
Excellent. And I'm pretty sure that next week I'm talking to Jay Wilkinson. So that'll be a really interesting, because he's a bit of a
Fantastic.
energizer bunny. So that'll be really interesting to see what's happening there. So